I have always been a private person. My life was built on careful discretion, a quiet existence where my thoughts and feelings were my own. But with Alex, my sibling, it was different. We had an unbreakable bond, or so I thought. I trusted them implicitly, more than anyone else in the world. They were my confidant, the one person I believed would always understand and protect my deepest self. It was a comfort, a foundation I never questioned. I remember a time, years ago, when my world felt like it was crumbling. I shared my most vulnerable moments with Alex during those dark days. I told them things I had never breathed a word of to anyone else. It was a painful, raw confession, and Alex listened without judgment. They held my hand, offered quiet reassurance. I felt safe, truly seen and loved without fear of exposure. That trust felt absolute. Another time, I was facing a difficult career decision, one that carried a lot of personal risk. I talked through every fear, every doubt with Alex. They knew my ambitions, my anxieties, my closely guarded dreams. They offered advice, but more importantly, they offered a listening ear and a promise of secrecy. I felt so grateful to have someone who knew the real me, the parts I kept hidden from the world, and who I believed would never betray that sacred trust. Lately, though, there had been small things, subtle moments that pricked at my calm. Alex would sometimes mention something about my day, a thought I'd had, or a small worry before I'd even told them. It was unsettling. I would dismiss it, telling myself it was just sibling intuition, that we were so close we just knew each other's minds. But a tiny, quiet voice in the back of my mind wondered how they could possibly know. One evening, Alex brought up a detail from my childhood, something very specific and obscure that I had barely remembered myself, let alone shared with anyone. They mentioned it so casually, as if it were common knowledge. I paused, a strange feeling blooming in my chest. How could they know that? I tried to shake off the feeling, telling myself Alex had simply remembered it more clearly than I had. It was just a coincidence, a trick of memory. Then the favors started. Alex asked for a small loan, just for a few weeks, they said. They needed help with rent, a temporary setback. I didn't hesitate. Of course I would help my sibling. I handed them the money without a second thought, happy to be there for them, just as they had always been there for me. It felt like a simple act of family support, nothing more, nothing less. A few months later, another request came. This time, it was for help with a larger bill. Alex mentioned how lucky they were to have me, hinting that I was always their safety net. There was a subtle shift in their tone, a slight pause after they spoke. It made me feel a flicker of unease, a sense of being used, but I quickly pushed it down. They were my sibling, they needed me. I told myself it was just my own stress making me think too much. A creeping sense of unease began to settle over me. It was vague, shapeless, like a shadow at the edge of my vision. I felt a persistent feeling that something was off, that the world around me was subtly shifting. I found myself feeling anxious, restless, but couldn't pinpoint why. I blamed my long work hours, the everyday pressures of life. It had to be stress, nothing more. My mind refused to consider anything else. There were moments when I felt Alex's gaze linger on me a little too long, or a comment they made would feel like a careful analysis of my behavior, not just a casual observation. It was unnerving. I would quickly look away or change the subject, my heart beating a little faster. I told myself I was being paranoid, that it was just my own insecurities playing tricks on me. Alex was my sibling. They loved me. The bond we shared was too strong, too deeply rooted in years of trust and shared history. The idea of betrayal, especially from Alex, was simply unthinkable. It was a concept so alien to my understanding of our relationship that my mind refused to even entertain it. Despite the growing unease, the subtle hints, I couldn't bring myself to question their loyalty. I held onto the belief that our connection was pure, unbreakable. I had no idea how wrong I was. The phone call came late one evening. Alex's voice was strained, full of a desperate urgency. They needed a very large sum of money quickly. It wasn't a loan this time, they said. It was an investment, a sure thing that would change everything for them. But they needed my help, and they needed it now. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. This was different from the small favors before. The amount was significant, far more than I could easily spare. My heart pounded with a sudden anxiety I couldn't place. I hesitated. I tried to explain that it was too much, that I couldn't just produce that kind of money overnight. I felt a pang of guilt, knowing Alex was in a tough spot, but a stronger feeling of self-preservation kicked in. My mind raced, trying to find a gentle way to say no without hurting their feelings. I felt a wave of discomfort wash over me. This was putting me in a very difficult position, and I didn't like it at all. Then Alex's voice changed. It became colder, sharper. Remember that night, years ago, when you confessed everything about your past? The one you said no one else knew. My breath hitched. It was a specific, private moment, something I had only ever shared with them in my deepest vulnerability. How could they bring that up now? A chill ran down my spine. The casual tone, the precise detail, it felt like a punch to the gut. I felt my blood run cold. My mind reeled. That conversation, that raw confession, was a sacred trust. It was meant to be buried, forgotten by everyone but me and Alex. For them to mention it now, in this context, was deeply unsettling. I felt a wave of nausea. Was this a threat? No, it couldn't be. Not Alex. I tried to rationalize it, to tell myself it was just a strange coincidence, a slip of the tongue. But the quiet, persistent voice in my head screamed that something was terribly wrong. I felt a profound sense of fear bloom in my chest. Then came the text message. A small audio file. My fingers trembled as I opened it. It was my own voice, clear as day from that very night, that very conversation. My most vulnerable words played back to me. The sound was unmistakable. I heard my own pain, my own secrets echoing from the phone. It was a snippet, just a few seconds, but it was enough. More than enough. My heart seized in my chest. I dropped the phone. The sound of my own voice, my own private pain, felt like a physical blow. Disbelief warred with a horrifying certainty. This wasn't a coincidence. This wasn't a trick of memory. This was real. My sibling, the one I trusted implicitly, had recorded me. My body went cold, then hot with a flush of shame and anger. How could this be? I felt completely exposed, utterly violated. The horrifying realization dawned on me slowly, then with crushing speed. If they had recorded that, what else had they recorded? The casual mentions, the subtle hints, the intuition, it all clicked into place with sickening clarity. Alex hadn't just been listening. They had been gathering ammunition. For years, every vulnerable moment, every private conversation, meticulously collected. I felt a profound sense of betrayal, deeper than anything I had ever known. My trust, my foundation, shattered into a million pieces. I called Alex back, my voice trembling with a mixture of rage and desperation. I demanded to know why, how they could do this to me. I tried to confront them, to make them understand the depth of their betrayal. I felt a desperate need for answers, for them to explain this monstrous act. My entire body shook with the force of my emotions. I just wanted it to be a terrible mistake, a misunderstanding. Alex's response was chillingly calm. You give me the money or everyone hears it, every single secret. There was no remorse, no hesitation in their voice, just a cold, calculated threat. My heart plummeted. They weren't asking, they were demanding, and they had the means to destroy me. I felt trapped, cornered. The world seemed to shrink around me. My deepest fears were now being weaponized against me by my own flesh and blood. I felt a cold dread settle deep in my bones. With a heavy heart, a sense of profound humiliation, I complied. I transferred the money, feeling each digit of the amount like a piece of my soul being ripped away. It was my first painful act of compliance under duress, a horrifying initiation into a new, terrifying reality. I felt stripped bare, my autonomy stolen. This was just the beginning, I knew, of a long, terrifying struggle to reclaim my life. The fight had only just begun, and I had no idea how I would ever escape this insidious web of control. Alex called again, much sooner than I expected. The previous payment felt like a fresh wound, and now they wanted more. The amount was even larger this time, and the deadline was impossibly short. My heart hammered against my ribs. I felt a surge of panic, a cold dread creeping through me. How could I possibly get that much money so fast? It felt like I was being squeezed, slowly but surely. I started to panic about my finances. My savings, which I had worked so hard for, were dwindling fast. I had to cut back on everything, canceling small comforts, postponing necessary repairs. Each decision felt like another piece of my life chipping away. I felt a constant knot in my stomach, the stress making it hard to eat or sleep. My financial security, once a source of quiet pride, was crumbling. The psychological torment began to intensify. Alex would casually drop hints in conversation, things only I knew, things that were part of my most private thoughts. It was never a direct threat, but a subtle reminder that they knew everything. I started to feel watched, even when I was alone. Every shadow seemed to hold a secret. Every quiet moment felt dangerous. My mind raced constantly, trying to guess what they would expose next. Alex began to manipulate my social life. They would make subtle comments to mutual friends, hinting at things that made me look unreliable or unstable, always just vague enough to avoid direct accusation. I noticed friends starting to pull away, their calls less frequent, their smiles less warm. I felt isolated, a growing chasm between me and the people I cared about. It was a slow, agonizing process of being cut off. My professional life also suffered. Alex knew details about a past work mistake, something I had worked hard to overcome. They never told my colleagues directly, but they would mention it to me, just loud enough for others to overhear, creating doubt. I felt a subtle shift in how I was perceived at work, a new wariness in their eyes. My confidence, once strong, began to waver, and I felt my reputation slowly eroding. My sense of self started to unravel. Who was I if my entire life, my past, my present, could be held hostage? The person I thought I was, the private, discreet individual, felt like a distant memory. I felt stripped bare, my identity no longer my own. I was just a collection of secrets, waiting to be exposed. I looked in the mirror and barely recognized the hollow-eyed person staring back. The fear was constant, a suffocating blanket that never lifted. Every notification on my phone sent a jolt of panic through me. Every stranger's glance felt like a knowing stare. I couldn't relax, couldn't breathe freely. My world had shrunk to the size of my fear, a tiny, dark space where I was perpetually on guard. I felt like a hunted animal, always waiting for the next attack. One evening, Alex called with another demand, this one more outrageous than before. They spoke with a chilling calm, detailing how they would ruin me if I didn't comply, listing specific secrets that would devastate my life. There was no hint of emotion, just pure, cold calculation. I felt a profound chill, realizing the absolute remorselessness of their betrayal. This wasn't a sibling, this was a predator. I finally broke. The weight of it all, the constant fear, the financial drain, the erosion of my life became too much. I collapsed, sobbing uncontrollably, the tears a torrent of fear, anger, and despair. I felt utterly helpless, trapped in a cage of my own making, a prisoner to my own flesh and blood. The reality of my captivity hit me with a crushing force. I was at the absolute brink, but through the tears, a flicker of something new began to stir. A tiny spark of defiance. I couldn't live like this anymore. This wasn't a life. It was an existence dictated by fear. I had to fight back. The thought was terrifying, but the alternative was worse. I didn't know how or what it would cost, but I knew I had to find a way to reclaim my life, no matter what. The idea, though faint, felt like the first breath of fresh air in months. The tears had stopped, but a cold, clear anger had taken their place. I looked at my reflection at the hollow eyes and knew I couldn't live like this anymore. The fear was still there, a constant hum, but beneath it, a tiny spark had ignited. I had lost so much already. What else was there to take? A quiet resolve settled deep within me. It was time to fight back, no matter the cost. My first step was to understand what I was up against. I started to research, late at night when everyone else was asleep. I looked up laws about privacy, blackmail, and digital evidence. The legal terms felt heavy and complex, but I pushed through, reading every article, every case study. My mind, once clouded by fear, now focused with a sharp intensity. I needed to know my rights and how they could be protected. Then I moved to the technical side. How could Alex have recorded me? What kind of devices, what methods? I delved into cybersecurity forums, learning about hidden cameras, recording apps, and data recovery. It was a dark, unsettling world, but understanding it felt like gaining a small piece of control. I felt a growing sense of dread about the lengths Alex had gone to, but also a grim determination to uncover it all. I started a new, secret journal. Not a diary of feelings, but a cold, hard record of facts. Every demand Alex made, every threatening text, every unsettling phone call, I wrote it all down. Dates, times, specific words. It felt strange to turn their weaponized words into my own evidence, but it was necessary. I felt a grim satisfaction in this methodical collection of their cruelty. I also began to save everything. Screenshots of messages, recordings of their veiled threats. It was painful to revisit those moments, to hear their voice, but I forced myself. Each piece of evidence felt like a heavy stone, slowly building a wall against them. I was turning their own game against them, collecting the very things they used to control me. This act of defiance brought a strange, quiet strength. I knew I couldn't do this alone, but I had to be careful. I thought of Sarah, an old friend I hadn't spoken to much lately. She was always kind, always level-headed. I sent her a simple message, just checking in. My heart felt a little lighter just thinking about reconnecting, but also heavy with the secret I couldn't yet share. It was a small step, but it felt huge. When Sarah called back, I spoke vaguely about feeling overwhelmed, about family stress. I didn't reveal anything specific, just hinted at a difficult situation. Her voice was warm, full of concern. She offered to listen, to help in any way she could. I felt a fragile hope bloom inside me. It was a test, a small opening, and her response gave me a tiny bit of courage to keep going. I realized how much I missed having someone to lean on. With new information and a flicker of external support, my mind moved to the next phase, a plan. I needed irrefutable proof, something that would stand up in court, something that would expose Alex fully. I started to map out steps, thinking several moves ahead like a chess game. This wasn't just about escaping, it was about dismantling their entire scheme. The plan became my obsession. Every detail, every possible outcome, every risk. I thought about how Alex operated, their patterns, their weaknesses. It was agonizing, forcing myself to analyze the person who had betrayed me so deeply. But with each step of the plan, I felt a little stronger, a little more in control. This meticulous work was a way to reclaim my mind, to turn my fear into a weapon. I was no longer just a victim. I was a strategist, preparing for a battle I never wanted. Alex had used my deepest secrets against me. Now, I would use their own methods, their own evidence to bring them down. The thought was terrifying, but also empowering. The time for fear was ending. The time for action was about to begin, and I was ready to face them, armed with their own truth. I sent Alex a text. It was a bait designed to make them feel safe, to draw them out. I mentioned a new problem I was having, something that sounded like it needed their help and guidance. My heart pounded. This felt like a dangerous game, but I knew I had to play it. I waited for their reply. My phone clutched in my hand. It was the first move of my counterattack. Alex responded quickly. They took the bait just as I hoped. Their message was full of the usual demands mixed with veiled threats. They even referenced a specific secret, one they had used before. It was a familiar pattern, a chilling reminder of their control. But this time, their words were not just threats, they were evidence. I felt a cold calm settle over me. They were walking right into it. I suggested we meet. A neutral place, a quiet coffee shop where I knew I could set up. I felt a knot of anxiety, but also a fierce determination. This was it. The moment I had planned for, the moment I would finally turn the tables. I made sure my hidden recorder was charged, my notes ready. Every step felt heavy, yet necessary. The air felt thick with unspoken tension. Alex arrived, looking confident, almost smug. They started talking about their needs, their problems already laying the groundwork for another demand. I let them speak, my gaze steady. Then I cut them off. "Alex," I said, my voice quiet but firm, "I know about the recordings." The words hung in the air, heavy and unexpected. I watched their face, waiting for a reaction. Disbelief flickered across Alex's face, quickly replaced by a dismissive laugh. "What recordings? Are you feeling all right?" They scoffed, trying to gaslight me to make me doubt myself. Their voice was scornful, full of their usual arrogance. I felt a familiar pang of hurt, but it was quickly overshadowed by my resolve. I would not let them control the narrative this time. I didn't answer with words. I pulled out my phone and played a short audio clip. It was their voice, clear and undeniable, threatening me, detailing a secret. The sound filled the small space between us. Alex's eyes widened. The color drained from their face. Their jaw dropped. The smugness vanished, replaced by pure shock. I felt a strange mix of sadness and cold satisfaction. The shock quickly turned to rage. "You think you can trick me?" Alex hissed, their voice low and venomous. "You'll regret this. I have everything. More than you can imagine. I'll expose it all." Their threats, once whispered, were now shouted, confirming everything I needed to hear. Their desperation was showing, and it was a chilling sight. I remained silent, letting them incriminate themselves. Every word, every furious threat was being captured. My hidden device was working perfectly. I felt a surge of relief, knowing that their own rage was becoming my strongest weapon. Alex continued to rant, listing secrets, detailing the destruction they would unleash. They were digging their own grave with every sentence. I just listened, collecting the evidence. Then the anger shifted to a desperate plea, a frantic attempt to regain control. "Wait, we can still fix this." Alex stammered, their voice cracking. "Just give me the recorder. We can forget all this." Their eyes darted around, looking for an escape. I saw the fear in them, the realization that their power was slipping away. It was a grim victory, but a victory nonetheless. I stood up, ending the confrontation. "It's over, Alex," I said, my voice steady. "I have everything I need." I left the cafe, the sound of their desperate calls fading behind me. The weight of years of fear lifted, replaced by a heavy, determined resolve. The trap had been sprung. Now the real fight, the public fight, was about to begin. I knew this was just the beginning of their downfall. The recordings were undeniable. Alex's voice, their threats, their demands all captured. I sat for hours, weighing my options. Exposing them publicly felt like tearing a part of my own history open, but keeping their secret meant living in fear forever. I thought of every sleepless night, every ounce of dignity stolen. The fear was still there, but a stronger force, a quiet resolve, pushed me forward. I knew I had to choose the platform where the truth would resonate loudest, where it could not be ignored. This was the only way to truly reclaim my life. My fingers trembled as I prepared to release the evidence. It was a digital folder, meticulously organized, containing years of their own words, their own calculated malice. Each file represented a piece of my shattered trust, now transformed into a weapon for justice. I took a deep, shaky breath, the silence of the room amplifying the pounding in my chest. Then, with a quiet click, I sent it out into the world. The moment felt surreal, a profound release and a terrifying leap all at once. The news spread quickly, like wildfire. My phone buzzed constantly with messages, not from Alex, but from others. I saw the comments, the shock, the anger directed at them. People who had once admired Alex were now expressing disgust. It was a strange mix of relief and a deep, aching sadness. The sibling I had known, the one I had loved, was gone, replaced by this public image of betrayal. I felt a quiet ache, knowing that even in victory there was profound loss. Alex tried to fight back. They issued statements trying to discredit me, claiming I was unstable, fabricating stories. But the evidence was too strong, too clear. Their own words, their own voice spoke against them. I watched as their carefully constructed world crumbled. Friends and family, once loyal, began to pull away. The silence around them was deafening. I felt no joy in their downfall, only a quiet, weary satisfaction that justice was finally taking its course. The public exposure led to official action. Authorities began their investigation, reviewing the evidence I had provided. It was a long, slow process, but each step felt like a brick being laid in the foundation of my reclaimed life. I cooperated fully, providing every detail, every recording. The weight of justice slowly, steadily moved forward. It was no longer just my private battle. It was a matter of public record, a legal reckoning. In the quiet aftermath, the trauma of betrayal still lingered. I found myself sitting alone often, processing the years of fear and manipulation. It was a complicated grief, mourning the loss of a sibling who was still alive, yet utterly transformed by their own actions. I knew the person I thought I knew was an illusion, but the pain of that realization was profound. It would take time, I knew, to heal these deep psychological wounds. I began the arduous process of rebuilding my life, piece by piece. The first step was reclaiming my physical space, my privacy. I changed the locks on my home, deleted old contacts, and created new boundaries. Each act, no matter how small, felt like a deliberate step towards freedom. I started to breathe more easily within my own walls, knowing that my secrets were once again my own, safely guarded. Healing was not a straight path. I sought professional help, finding a calm, steady voice in a therapist who understood the complexities of my trauma. Talking through the betrayal, the fear, the anger, felt like slowly untangling a knot that had been tightening for years. I learned to trust again, first in small ways, then in larger ones. It was a journey, not a destination, but each step brought a quiet peace. As time passed, I felt my strength grow. The experience had changed me, leaving scars, but also an undeniable resilience. I had fought back against unimaginable betrayal and won. There were moments when I shared my story, not for sympathy, but to inspire others who might be trapped in similar webs of control. I found a new purpose, a quiet power in knowing I had reclaimed my autonomy and could help others find theirs. I was a survivor, not a victim. Life found a new rhythm, a quiet calm I hadn't known in years. The fear was a distant echo, replaced by a profound sense of peace. The betrayal had been a dark chapter, a soul-crushing experience, but it had also forged me into someone stronger, someone who understood the true value of trust and privacy. I had reclaimed my dignity, my security, and my life. The path ahead was open, stretching towards a future I now controlled, free from the shadows of the past.